Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something, well, truly remarkable.
Hmm.
It's about how really challenging life experiences, even trauma, can sometimes lead to profound personal growth.
Right. And we're not just talking about getting back to normal, are we?
No, exactly. It's this kind of unexpected potential for positive change that can actually emerge from those struggles.
Yeah, and we've gathered some really fascinating material exploring this idea. It's often called post-traumatic growth, or PTG for short.
PTG, right.
So we'll be digging into what that actually means, the processes that seem to drive it, what helps it along,
hmm
and even how it connects with things like, spirituality and different ways we approach healing.
So the mission today is really to unpack PTG, get a real handle on what it is, how it might happen, and maybe why it's a concept worth understanding for you listening.
Precisely.
Okay, so this term post-traumatic growth, it's not brand new, is it?
No, not at all. It
Yeah.
came about in the mid-90s, really solidified by researchers Tedeschi and Calhoun, and they used it to describe both the sort of journey of positive change after difficult times and the positive outcomes themselves.
And you mentioned it's not just getting back to normal. There's
Huh.
a key distinction there.
Yes, absolutely.
Ah,
That's crucial. PTG isn't simply about bouncing back. That's more resilience, getting back to where you were.
right.
PTG is about growth. Beyond that previous level, it's a real transformation.
Transformation. Uh, okay. So how does this growth actually show up? What does it look like?
Well, it can manifest in some surprising ways, actually. You might find, say, a much greater appreciation for life, for the everyday things,
Yeah.
or a deeper sense of your own personal strength, maybe strength you didn't know you had,
Mm,
richer relationships, more meaningful connections with people, a sense of new possibilities opening up in
new
life.
paths forward.
Exactly. And sometimes even quite profound spiritual change or shifts in perspective. We'll definitely explore these areas more.
And what kind of events are we talking about here? Is it only major catastrophic things?
Well, they tend to be highly stressful events, certainly, but the range is broad. It could be bereavement, the loss of someone close,
Uh-huh.
coping with a serious illness, surviving a natural disaster,
Right.
being the victim of a crime, experiencing combat or war. Essentially, any deeply stressful event that fundamentally challenges how you see yourself and the world around you.
Okay, so that challenge aspect is key. It disrupts your view of the world.
Yes, and this leads to something really interesting. A central idea in PTG is how these events impact what's called your assumptive world.
Your assumptive world, like the basic beliefs you hold.
Exactly. Your core beliefs about yourself, about other people, how the world works, what you can expect from life.
Things you maybe take for granted.
Precisely. Beliefs about fairness, safety, your own mortality, your identity, the future, the meaning of it all. Trauma can just shatter these assumptions.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that would happen.
And it forces you, really, to reevaluate these fundamental beliefs.
Which must be incredibly difficult, painful even.
Oh, undoubtedly painful. But here's the fascinating part. That very disruption, that shattering, can actually be the catalyst. It can kick off this process of deep cognitive processing.
Thinking things through on a different level.
Yes, which can ultimately lead to new ways of understanding, new perspectives, and, well, new ways of living. It's not just adaptation, it's a kind of reconstruction.
Reconstruction, I like that. So it's not just any stressor then. It has to be something that really hits those core beliefs.
That seems to be the idea. The sources suggest it's those events that significantly challenge these core assumptions that are most likely to trigger the kind of deep reflection sometimes called rumination that can result in PTG.
As opposed to just, coping and recovering.
Right. More like forcing a fundamental rethink.
Okay, so let's dig into that a bit more. What are some of the key factors that influence whether PTG happens? One thing that caught my eye was the link with post-traumatic stress, PTSD. That's not straightforward, is it?
No, it's definitely not simple. It's actually quite counterintuitive in some ways. Research points towards what's called a curvilinear relationship.
Curvilinear, like a curve, not a straight line.
Exactly. So what that means is, up to a certain point, experiencing more post-traumatic stress symptoms can actually be associated with greater post-traumatic growth.
Really? That sounds backwards. How does that work?
Well, the thinking is that the distress, the struggle itself, can act as a kind of engine. It prompts the deep cognitive engagement, the wrestling with meaning that's needed for growth.
So the discomfort pushes you to think.
Kind of, yeah. But, and this is the crucial part of the curve, if the PTSD symptoms become too intense, too overwhelming,
Huh.
beyond a certain threshold, they can actually hinder or block that growth process. You're just trying to survive. You can't engage in that deeper processing.
Okay, so some distress might be necessary, even a precursor, but too much becomes debilitating for growth.
That's a good way to put it. It highlights that navigating that distress is key.
Like needing some friction to get moving, but not so much that you're stuck.
Precisely.
And you mentioned cognitive processing, that wrestling with meaning. Rumination plays a big role here, but apparently not all rumination is the same.
That's right. Calhoun and Tedeschi, the researchers we mentioned, make a really important distinction. They differentiate between automatic intrusive thoughts.
The ones that just pop into your head, often linked to PTSD.
Yes, those often distressing, repetitive thoughts about the trauma itself. They contrast that with a more deliberate kind of rumination.
Deliberate. So intentional thinking about it.
Exactly. Actively, intentionally reflecting on the event's meaning, its implications, trying to make sense of it. It's more reflective than just brooding.
Ah, okay. So less like being stuck on a loop and more like actively trying to understand.
Precisely. And the research suggests it's this deliberate, reflective rumination that really supports the meaning-making process and helps people develop new perspectives and ways of relating to the world after the trauma.
So working with the thoughts rather than just being overwhelmed by them.
Yeah, working with that rumination as reflection.
Makes sense. Now, what about other people? How important is social support in this process?
Hugely important, according to the sources. Sharing your experience, opening up about the trauma, what psychologists call self-disclosure.
Talking about it.
Yeah, basically.
Mhm.
It's been shown to really support that adjustment process and facilitate PTG. Feeling connected, understood, validated by others can be vital.
So just having people around helps.
Well, yes, but there's a nuance. For social support to really maximize growth, the people providing that support often need to have a pretty deep understanding of the individual's difficulties. It's not just about superficial comfort.
Right. They need to get it on some level.
Exactly. And interestingly, there's even research showing that if your partner is also experiencing PTG, it can positively influence your own relationship quality and reduce psychological distress for both of you.
Wow. So growth can almost be contagious within a close relationship.
In a supportive context, it seems so. And things like secure attachment styles, feeling safe and secure in your relationships, generally also seem to predict a greater likelihood of PTG.
Okay. So connection matters. And the quality of that connection is key. What about how we cope? Our coping strategies?
Yes, definitely. Different ways of coping can influence PTG. What seems beneficial is having a flexible coping style.
Flexible, meaning using different strategies.
Yeah, being able to incorporate both avoidance strategies and approach strategies.
Avoidant, like trying not to think about it, and approach, like tackling it head on.
Sort of. Limited use of avoidance, especially early on, might actually provide a necessary sense of psychological safety, like catching your breath before you engage more directly.
Okay, a temporary shield.
Right. Before you engage in those more confronting, approach-oriented strategies aimed at processing and growth. Problem-focused coping, trying to solve the practical problems arising from the trauma, is also linked positively.
That makes sense.
And even, perhaps paradoxically, some studies show avoidance coping having a positive correlation in certain contexts. And self-care coping, looking after yourself, that's another one linked to growth.
So it's not about one right way to cope, but maybe having a toolkit and knowing when to use which tool?
That seems to be the picture emerging. Adaptability is key.
Okay. And what about time? Does PTG happen quickly or is it a long game?
It generally seems to be a longer process. Those big schematic changes, the shifts in your core beliefs and worldview inherent in PTG, they usually take time to unfold.
It's not an overnight thing.
Definitely not. Longitudinal studies, the ones that follow people over months or years, show really complex paths. Some people show increasing growth over time, while others might experience growth and then kind of levels off or even tapers. So the precise impact of time is still something researchers are actively exploring. It's not always a simple upward curve.
Right, more complex trajectories. Does our underlying personality play a part? Are some people just more predisposed to this?
It appears so. Certain dispositional personality traits do seem to predict a greater likelihood of experiencing PTG.
Like what?
Well, things like openness to experience, being curious and open to new ideas.
Okay.
Hardiness, which is a kind of resilience, the ability to withstand stress, but also find new possibilities within it. A sense of coherence, which is basically believing the world is generally comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful.
A feeling that things basically make sense.
Yeah, or can be made sense of. And also optimism, having a general expectation that good things will happen.
So people with those traits might be more naturally inclined to find the growth path when things get tough.
That's what the evidence suggests, yes. They might have a disposition that helps them navigate the cognitive and emotional challenges involved.
Interesting. Now, a theme that keeps coming up is meaning, finding meaning. How central is that to PTG?
It seems absolutely central. Finding or making meaning in the aftermath of trauma is perhaps the core component of PTG.
The driving force, almost.
You could say that. Developing a greater sense of self-worth, maybe a feeling of goodwill or connection to others, that can contribute to lower PTSD symptoms and really foster growth.
And this applies in difficult jobs, too, like first responders.
Yes, definitely. Even in really challenging professions like frontline work where exposure to trauma is high, maintaining a sense of meaningfulness in the work itself can act as a significant buffer against psychological distress.
Protecting them, in a way.
Exactly. And it can actually promote PTG.
Yeah.
For people in those roles, exploring their sense of autonomy, their competence, their connection to colleagues, and their sense of beneficence, the feeling that they're doing good, can be really important after they've experienced critical incidents. It reconnects them to that purpose.
Connecting the dots between the difficult experiences and a larger sense of value.
Precisely.
Now, another area the sources highlight is spirituality. How does that fit into the picture of growth after trauma?
For many people, spirituality can be a really significant pathway to PTG. While engaging with their spiritual strengths, their beliefs, sacred narratives or stories, rituals, spiritual coping mechanisms, all of these can help individuals bridge the past trauma with the present reality.
Make sense of it within a larger framework.
Yes, and discover a path forward. Exploring those big themes, mortality, life's purpose, values, existential questions can be a really important part of the growth process for spiritual individuals.
And this isn't just for adults?
No, interestingly, even in children, spirituality is being increasingly recognized as a critical aspect of navigating trauma and loss, and it's being linked with PTG in younger populations too.
Wow.
And of course, faith communities themselves can play a crucial role. They can provide support, a sense of belonging, and nurture well-being, which all helps facilitate growth after adversity.
So that connection to something bigger, whether it's personal spirituality or community, can be a powerful resource.
Absolutely.
Okay, lastly, the sources talk about help from professionals, therapists, coaches, expert companions. How can they facilitate PTG?
They can play a vital role. An expert companion, someone like a therapist or a skilled coach, can provide the right conditions for growth. Things like empathy, being genuine, offering a non-judgmental presence. These are key.
Creating that safe space.
Exactly. That therapeutic relationship is fundamental. And then there are various therapeutic approaches that can be used. Cognitive processing models, narrative frameworks like the THRIVE model.
Different tools for the job.
Right. Coaching, for instance, can help individuals understand that responses to difficulty vary widely and help them focus on the elements that can specifically facilitate their own growth.
Tailoring the approach.
Yes. And there's also growing interest in body-mind-oriented therapies, things like somatic experiencing and mindfulness practices.
Addressing the physical side of trauma, too.
Right, their potential to address the physiological impact of trauma and promote overall well-being and growth. Practices like Mahavakya meditation are presented as holistic approaches that can help reconnect mind, body, and spirit after trauma.
Fostering inner strength.
Exactly. And helping people set meaningful life goals as part of that recovery and growth journey. It's about providing skilled guidance and support through that transformation.
Okay. So, pulling this all together, what are the key takeaways for you listening? This deep dive really shows that even when facing, incredibly significant adversity, this potential for positive change genuinely exists.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely not about minimizing the pain or the reality of trauma, not at all.
No.
It's more about recognizing this remarkable human capacity we seem to have for transformation. Not just surviving, but potentially finding growth.
It's complex, right? Not automatic.
Oh, definitely complex. It's influenced by so many factors we've discussed. The event itself, how our minds process it, the support we get, our own inner strengths, our beliefs. It's a whole constellation of things.
And some really intriguing points came up, like the idea that distress itself, up to a point, can actually be a catalyst for growth.
Yeah, that's quite counterintuitive, but seems key.
And the sheer power of how we make sense of our experiences, that deliberate reflection, the potential to find deeper meaning and purpose, even after really profound challenges. It offers a different lens, doesn't it? A more hopeful perspective, maybe.
I think so. And the emerging understanding of how things like spirituality and these more holistic body-mind therapies can facilitate this growth, that really opens up some interesting new avenues for healing and personal development.
It really does. Which leads to a final thought, perhaps a provocative one for you to consider.
Hmm.
If post-traumatic growth is a natural human potential, this capacity we have, how can we as individuals and maybe as a society get better at fostering the conditions that allow this growth to unfold?
That's a huge question.
Right. Not just in the aftermath of major trauma, but perhaps even in how we navigate the everyday challenges life throws at us. Maybe think about the core beliefs that shape your own life. How might unexpected events challenge or reshape them? What could growth sparked by challenge actually look like for you?